Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of Artgasm. I'm your host, Allison Moon. I'm a sex educator and an art lover, and I'm thrilled that you're joining me on this podcast journey. Coming up in this episode, I talk with Rachel Lark, who is a fantastic musician and all-around wonderful human. I just saw her perform last night in Portland, Oregon. She's based in San Francisco, which is where I met her. She's a regular musical guest at an event called Bawdy Storytelling, which is a storytelling event that focuses on sex, gender, and kink. I've told a number of stories on that stage for Bawdy Storytelling. It's a really wonderful event, so if you're in San Francisco or any of the cities that it's often in, I recommend checking it out. I'll put a link to this and pretty much everything else that we discuss in the show notes of this episode. So for the record, it's Bawdy, B-A-W-D-Y storytelling. Rachel has an amazing voice and a fantastic stage presence, and it's just a delight to hang out with her. We talk about performance, life as a touring musician, songwriting, the Me Too movement, body image, and a lot of sex. If it wasn't clear, by the way, by both the name of the podcast and the topics that we cover, every single episode of Artgasm is an episode where we talk frankly about sex. The good, the bad, the pretty, the ugly, all of it. So listener discretion is advised, like every single time. We use vernacular, we use slang, we talk about bodily functions and body parts. We might use words that you don't like, we might use words that you do like. My only recommendation is that you just listen with open ears and an open mind, understanding that everybody approaches the topic of sexuality differently, just like we all approach art differently. And my hope is that you find the conversations fun, amusing, and hopefully illuminating. Before we get to the talk with Rachel, though, I wanted to share an article that I read that came out right after the Oscars last month. It's called The Male Glance, and it was written by Lily Loofborough? I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that right. Lily, it's L-I-L-I. It appeared in the literary journal VQR. I highly recommend checking this article out. I'll quote from the essay itself to kind of describe what the essay is about. This is from the essay The Male Glance. The male glance is the opposite of the male gaze. Rather than linger lovingly on the parts it most wants to penetrate, it looks, assumes, and moves on. It is, above all else, quick. Under its influence, we rejoice in our distant diagnostic speed. The glance is social and ethical the way advice columns are social and ethical, a communal pulse declaring briefly, definitively, and with minimal information which narrative textures constitute turgid substance. And skipping ahead a little bit, rather than investigate or discover, we point and classify. Generations of forgetting to zoom into female experience aren't easily shrugged off, however noble our intentions. And the upshot is that we still don't expect female texts to have universal things to say. We imagine them as small and careful, or petty and domestic, or vain, or sassy, or confessional. We might expect them to be sentimental, or melodramatic, or even, in the days of Transparent and I Love Dick and Girls, provocative, unflattering, and exhibitionist. But we don't expect them to be experimental, and we don't expect them to be great. I so strongly recommend checking out this essay. You can find it at vqronline.org, and again, it's called The Male Glance. I'll probably talk about it again in more depth in a later episode. I would love for you to check it out, though, and get a sense of it. I think it speaks so brilliantly to an issue that is still plaguing art created by women about women, in this, again, assumption that female stories cannot, by their very nature, be universal stories. And I think it's so interesting to interrogate this idea. So go check that out. It's a great, great read. Now I'm going to give you my conversation with Rachel Lark. And at the end of the interview, I'm going to come back solo and give you a couple of little housekeeping things, some links of where you can find us, how you can support the podcast, how to subscribe, all the fun stuff if you're interested in sticking around. So without further ado, I give you Rachel Lark. Hello, Rachel Lark.
Hi.
Thanks for joining me.
My pleasure.
At my dining room table.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, with your cute dog.
Yeah, with Ripley running around.
I've been wanting to meet Ripley, so I'm very excited to meet Ripley.
Yeah, she's kind of like getting pretty famous now. You can follow her at Ripley the dog working on her Instagram following. So that's actually why I'm here, is plugging Ripley. And it's been great. Thanks, Allison.
My pleasure. I'm happy to raise awareness of cute dogs everywhere I can. Yeah, so you were talking about that you wanted to make Ripley a tour dog?
Yes, exactly. I do a lot. Yeah, I tour the country by myself for the most part. Sometimes I tour with my band. And yeah, I wanted a dog to make tour less lonely. It's amazing how effective it's been. She like kicks it with me in the car, and like I can just, like pet her the whole time we're driving. And, we take pee breaks at the same time. And when I get a happy snack, she gets a bone. Happy snack, of course, is like a very technical term in the music industry. It's when you go to a gas station and you get like anything you want.
Thank you for clarifying that for me. Yes, I saw somebody had tweeted, no matter how old you are, when you are on a road trip and you stop for snacks, you should act like a 6-year-old with a $100 bill.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's just like, I like to feast.
What are your happy snacks?
Doritos, Cool Ranch Doritos for sure. And those like, what are they called? Those like peanut butter wafer chocolate things that are usually like 25 cents at the gas station.
Like they're kind of like Butterfingers, you mean? Or
no, they're not like Butterfingers, but it's like a wafer and they're rectangular prism.
like wafer cookies, like those cheaper wafer cookies you would get?
Yeah,
I feel like, because I'm like a peanut butter aficionada, and I'm surprised that I don't know.
Oh, no, these things are light and airy and just like peanut buttery, and they're so good.
Oh, that sounds
I'll
fantastic.
remember what they're called soon.
Cool.
Yeah. But those are my go-tos. And, I don't get them at every gas station stop. It's when I need a happy snack.
Yes, totally.
When I need to turn this ship around and get a happy snack.
Gotta get a happy snack. So what does Ripley do when you're on stage?
She kicks it at the merch table, which is it's also a very useful thing about having a dog on tour. She draws people to the merchandise.
Totally.
And yeah, it's really great. Like she just stays there. She gets pets, and sometimes she hangs out in the green room. It kind of depends on the venue. Occasionally, she's not allowed in the venue. And then
those are bullshit venues that you never crack to, right?
Right.
I mean, just kidding.
I'm sure
they're
have
lovely.
me back, please.
So, I've known you for a number of years.
Yeah, it's been a while now.
Yeah, I met you when you performed at Bawdy Storytelling in San Francisco. And so I guess I knew you as a ukulele performer, primarily, and also that you sang dirty songs, which I know is definitely an aspect of you, but there's more to you than that as a musician. So, I mean, tell me a little bit about...
It's not just penises, goddammit. There's more.
There's more to you than penises. So tell me more about more of your music. I mean, I did see you when you did your big solo show of Studies Have Shown.
Oh yeah,
which was great.
Thanks.
Yeah. So tell me about your musical oeuvre, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the umbrella of what I do is sort of a analytical, critical songwriting lens. And that tends to touch on the things that I really care about, like feminism and politics and sexuality and kink, and also just, other things that society sort of has a take on that I really adamantly disagree with. Sometimes it's also religion and psychedelics and other political issues that have nothing to do with sex. Given what sort of took off when I started doing it, I feel like writing about sex positivity and specifically kind of that intersection of sex positivity and feminism in a joyous way, as opposed to a sort of angry way, although I do that too, that became like a good 50% of what I do.
Yeah, it makes me think of, one of the songs that I think is probably one of your more famous songs is Warm, Bloody, and Tender, which is about period sex.
Yeah.
Which is that intersection of talking about it's fighting against body shame and the shame that we put on women for having this very natural thing that happens to most of us. But at the same time, it's very sexy and very raunchy. Yeah. And very funny.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that sometimes there's this, there's a lot of women in comedy that make a lot of jokes about sex, but often there's this sort of slant to their comedy where the butt of the joke is like, look at how like I'm not fit for marriage because I'm such a slut. Or look at how clueless I am about sex. Isn't it icky and weird? Or, you know, so there's always like, even though it's transgressive for women to like be really raunchy, there's still often in what I see in like pop media, this like price that women need to pay to be sexual for it to be palatable to like mainstream audiences. And I think that what like I am trying to do is sort of speak about sex from a place of knowledge and comfort and not really like feeling weirded out by the sex that I'm singing about. Yeah, I don't know.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it makes me another song of yours that I really like. Is it Surprise?
Yeah.
Which is, that's a great song. Can you tell briefly the story of Surprise?
Yeah, this is one of the few songs of my, so I write a lot of characters in my songs and a lot of storylines that sort of come from a thought that end up taking on a life of their own that isn't like autobiographical. This song is autobiographical. I had sex with a guy with a really, really big dick, and then I had an ovarian cyst rupture. And I went to the emergency room because I thought I had appendicitis because the symptoms are very, very similar. And, you know, and then I found out I had a ruptured ovarian cyst. So I wrote a song about it, which is, you know, what you do with a medical emergency. And it was basically everything in that song happened the way that I wrote it. I tried to ask the doctor if the sex that I had is what caused the ovarian cyst to rupture, and he essentially wouldn't answer the question. He sort of said in a very judgy way, like, well, was it rough sex? And I was sort of like, we were fucking. I mean, it was, you know, there was fast, like in and out. I don't, and I just like really couldn't get an answer from like any medical people about it. And I still actually to this day don't really know. I've heard a difference of opinion from a lot of trusted medical people about whether the size of this guy's dick caused it or not.
So it could have just been a coincidence?
It could have just been a coincidence.
Huh. Interesting.
It's a really strong coincidence.
Yeah.
I think.
Yes.
But, you know.
They were like, out of all the parts of your life where you weren't having sex with a man with a big dick.
Right.
Why?
Yeah.
Well, correlation, if not causation, I suppose.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
They don't tell you that a penis that size could hurt you if you go too fast. But why would they? 'Cause they don't tell you shit. Like they don't tell you that an IUD is gonna poke the penis of the guy you're screwing. And they don't tell you that HPV is just expected with the sexual acts you're doing. And they don't tell you that when you ovulate, there are these cysts that develop that you could irritate and then surprise. Sometimes he'll bust a nut and he'll bust yours too. Oh yeah.
The song itself is so great. The lyrics are great, but the way you perform it is also fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
I think that what's fun to me is, like you were saying, that it's not so much of that the joke is on you, right? Like with comedy, it's very self-effacing.
Right.
And it has to be. But what you do, it's like you're kind of mad at the doctor and you're mostly mad at society for like, how is this a thing we don't know about?
Right.
And then just the chorus of like, surprise, Jesus Christ, how do we not know about this in society? You think somebody would have told someone at some point.
Right.
Or that like, hey, when you bleed massively after sex, maybe some medical literature would describe what's happening.
Right. Exactly.
And I like that you kind of have this very snarky tone about it. That's really more about like, it's very feminist in the way where it's just like, this is bullshit. And this is the thing that happened. So, I mean, obviously, you're a musician. You have a pretty amazing range. Do you find that you're getting pigeonholed as like a quote-unquote feminist musician? Or do you feel like you've kind of escaped that in some way?
I don't know. I mean, I think that I guess I feel pressure to write songs about sex and feminism, but that's okay with me. There's other stuff I want to write about, but I think that most of my fans are like receptive to hearing other topics as well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think I went through a bit of a crisis maybe a year or two into getting a bigger audience, mainly through Dan Savage, who had me on his show. And then it was sort of a lot of people came to know me through Dan Savage. And even at Bawdy Storytelling, it's like I only play certain songs at those places. And so I went through this like feeling of, man, now I just have to be funny and I have to be raunchy and like I'm a multifaceted person. I want to write about all kinds of things. I have lots of feelings, lots and lots of feelings. But now I'm just a little more aware that, you know, this is a sort of Venn diagram of like what I'm good at and what there's a sort of need for. And that's how you figure out what kind of work to do in the world, I think.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what you like doing, what you're good at, what people want you to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I'm pretty okay with that. And also it's sort of funny because it now feels like more relevant than ever. I just feel like there's a lot of like simplicity going on in the debate around especially like sexual assault, sexual harassment right now. And I really like taking a sort of deep intellectual dive and kind of trying to tease things apart. And I feel like we need a lot of that right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I'm good with it.
How are you writing again at those issues or feelings that you're having?
Well, right now I've been trying to write a lot about bad sex. I've been thinking a lot about, okay, so we've covered that sexual assault is bad. That took millennia. So, you know,
Congratulations, world.
Yeah, let's not downplay the success of that consensus. And of course, it isn't yet a consensus everywhere. And there's like still, you know, a lot of work to be done there. But I think we can all agree that sexual assault is wrong and it shouldn't happen. And there should be accountability around it when it happens. Same with sexual harassment. But now, and I guess a lot of people are also like comfortable with the term rape culture. Mm-hmm. But now I want to get out of the mindset of like rape culture and also just into the like culture and the bad sex that most people I think are having in the world, and especially most women, at least a lot of women are having bad sex. And like, and it's not as simple as like aggressor victim, right? It's like the water we swim in that sort of sets up those scenarios. So I feel like that's the new frontier of like feminist sex songwriting. So yeah.
So are you talking about your own personal experiences with bad sex, or?
I think so. I think it took me a long time to figure out how to talk during sex, how to ask for things, how to not end up in a sort of head spiral when I wasn't comfortable, and how to, you know, like just sort of laugh it off and be like, oh, I don't like this. Let's do something else. Yeah. Like that took therapy and like work and, you know, and I do think men have an easier time in those situations of being like, actually, I don't like this. Can we try something else? And so I think that I have, you know, some experience with that journey, and I'm sort of interested in like trying to articulate that journey, but also like why was that there? Because I had to go through all those lessons, even though I was raised in an incredibly empowered feminist household where sex was not something that was shamed at all. And, you know, I started having sex in my teens. It was not like a secret that I had to keep. And, you know, even then I was still very, like unintegrated with my desires. I just knew that I was like horny, but I didn't know what I wanted.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I teach this stuff for a living, and I always say when I'm teaching these workshops, like, I teach this stuff for a living, and I still have a hard time speaking up, even with my partner of 10 years.
Yeah.
Even when I know, like, we can talk about everything. But sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't know. It's been a long day. I don't want to stop the moment, blah, blah, blah.
Right. I don't want to ruin anything.
Right,
I'll
right.
just sit through this thing I don't enjoy.
Right.
Because I don't want to ruin. I don't want to, let's just not. We don't want to make a scene.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It is crazy. It's funny too that I do find, I mean, like, how do you experience the audiences? Like, do you feel like your audiences get confronted, or are they generally like on board? Like, how do people respond?
It's fascinating to me because by and large, audiences seem very on board. And I think that this is like the trick of comedy, because there's like a mind control element at play here where, if I were to just propose an argument to someone, it's just like inviting them to disagree with me. Mm-hmm. But if I make a joke and they laugh at it, it's almost like they're admitting that they agreed with the premise.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's interesting. Huh.
You know?
Yeah.
And so they feel that they've felt this way forever. Mm-hmm. You know? They feel like they've always had an analysis, like this about feminism.
That's funny. I like that.
Yeah. So I feel like it is kind of mind control, like for the greater good. Mm-hmm. You get people singing along to a song about rimming and they feel that they're okay with rimming by the end of it. You know, they think they were okay with it. Same with like Warm, Bloody and Tender. I mean, there's guys singing along to a song about period sex and like loving it. And I suspect that they leave there the next time they're confronted with a woman on their period, like less grossed out. That's what I hope.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that like you're talking about like the laughing, like it helps normalize the experience. So, like like the rimming song, what's it called again?
You Only Live Once.
You Only Live Once. I mean, that one I think you play a lot at Bawdy for sure.
Yeah.
And that one I'll catch myself singing while I'm cooking, right? Because it's a very catchy song, but it's really sweet because I think talking from the perspective of a woman who wants to like put her tongue on a man's hairy asshole is really, that's transgressive, right? I think that's really, and I talk about like body, like counteracting body shame. Like it's like a woman desiring to shove her face in a guy's crack, which is so not something you hear about.
So not.
Even when like the stuff like Sex and the City came out and we're like, oh, we're being so transgressive. It's like, well, but
right,
so to speak.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that song has a sing-along component is really special.
Yeah.
Because you're having everyone sing, "Let me lick your asshole" over and over again.
Yeah.
You're feeling hot, so fresh and so clean. Give me a taste of those fresh salad greens. You only live once, so let me lick your asshole. Your asshole. You only live once, so let me lick your asshole. Your asshole. Just 'cause you're straight don't mean you got no prostate. Babe, there wasn't no mistake when I slipped onto your taint. Let me in. It ain't no sin. Yeah, that freaky little pink. I wanna get.
It's really beautiful.
Yeah, there was this one time I played it at Bawdy, and afterwards this like very sweet young straight couple came up to me and they were like, "Excuse me, we just we wanted to let you know we're gonna lick each other's assholes tonight."
Do you appreciate those kinds of things?
I do.
Okay.
Sometimes, I know, I'm sure you experience this as well. You're sort of like, I think what happens sometimes is people feel that this intimacy has happened, that they feel is a two-way intimacy when you've actually just been on stage talking for a long time or singing for a long time and like you have not connected with them. They connected with you, but you don't know who this person is. And they come up to you and they're just ready to spill their guts about everything they did last night and everything they want to do. And, I view it as part of my like work in the world to, hear them out. That particular situation I just felt was very tastefully done. It's just, a quick, like, we just wanted to let you know we're about to go do the thing you told us to. So
there we go. Win. Yeah, it's funny. I feel like, the jubilation aspect, and like some of your songs certainly are angry, and some of your songs have a lot of intense emotion behind them. And at the same time, I think that there is something special that happens with like songs that are jubilant around sexuality. And again, like what I like to do in my work is like, I want to talk about the silly things and talk about the exciting things, almost just because like it makes the silly, exciting things sound more exciting. So often, especially in sex, we talk about this as though like, this the sex that I got was growing up was like, if you have sex, you're going to ruin your relationship, you're going to get pregnant, or you're going to get AIDS and die. Yeah. And so it's like, so that's still baked into our culture in a lot of ways, that being able to talk about like ridiculous things, amazing things, fun things, I think it does help kind of undo the shame. And I think a lot of the shame is what creates a lot of the violence and a lot of the non-consent stuff that happens, because we're so disconnected from joy. Right. That it just feels like, well, sex is never supposed to feel good anyway. So.
Yeah. And then the shame can go another level too, where you're like, well, I know better than that shame, so I'm going to have fun every single time, and it's going to be fantastic. And if it's not fantastic, it means that, like, I'm not, free from society's clutches, and I'm some kind of rigid, frigid loser.
Yeah, totally.
And so you can go, it's like these two extremes, and we think, like, either we're just this, like, super sexually empowered. I think people probably see me on stage and like assume that I have this like magical sex life where I'm just fulfilling a new fantasy every night with new people and everything's fantastic. And it's like, no, I'm struggling with the same shit that I'm singing about. And I'm, the songs are ways of trying to get through it. It's all like really messy and interesting and super fun. But, we can't like romanticize it either. Like we were raised in this shame-driven culture, and it's hard to shake.
Yeah. Well, I think that's kind of beautiful. Songwriting for you is just, again, like that's kind of what art's supposed to be, right? Like an opportunity for you to grapple with your own senses of truth and what you want to be in the world. So the idea that you are able to use songwriting as an opportunity for that is really special.
Totally.
And that you have people who connect with that is amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's cool that I found this like path to humor, because it used to be that I could only write when I was in pain, because writing was always this puzzle solving for me and like figuring out how I felt about something. So it was all sad songs. High school, early college, just sad, just heartbreak and misery and really angsty, like, why does it even matter? And so it's cool. It was very rewarding for me to find this, realm where I could write from a sort of intellectual puzzle solvey kind of place and not have to be like in an emotional crisis to write.
Yeah, that's a huge power. I think it's kind of like the idea of, from a writing perspective, it's like you just have to do it. Like,
yes.
It doesn't matter if you're feeling it.
Yes.
You gotta put your butt in a seat and just make something happen that day.
And nothing does that for me like a deadline and having told everyone that this thing will be ready by that deadline.
Yeah.
It can't, for me anyway, when I make little personal deadlines that only I know about, they don't work. There's some quote, I can't remember who said it, but my mom loves it. It was like, I love deadlines. I love the sound they make as they whiz by.
Yeah, totally.
Do you know who that is?
I don't know who that was, but I've heard it for sure.
But yeah, so for me, it's real when I tell Dixie that there will be a new song debuted on this date, and she tells everybody, and then it's got to happen.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if I'm in the mood to write.
Yeah.
Just work. It's got to get done.
Yeah. I used to teach a class that was all about creativity and like how to just get the juices flowing. And the second tenet of the 7 that I taught was accountability. Like tell somebody that you're doing this.
Right.
And I know a lot of people that creates a lot of pressure that feels really not okay.
Yeah.
But for me, it's like, I think Kickstarter has changed the game for so many people, not because it gets you money, but because you just told like hundreds of people that you're delivering a product to them.
Yeah.
And if if you don't do it, you have to either hide or apologize profusely to a lot of upset people.
Yeah.
And that to me feels really necessary.
Yeah.
To be like, oh, yep, no, I promised this shit. And y'all gave me $25,000 to make it.
Right.
So bitch better make it.
Gotta happen.
Like, there's no choice.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think people are different, and I definitely know some of those types that deadlines would just like constrain them and say whatever. But that's me. I need it to be real. I need to have to do it. I was a good student. I liked those, the test is on this date. Know it all by then. Get my grade. Boom.
Yeah.
Loved that shit.
Well, it's also interesting, too, the way that you perform. I mean, obviously, you do perform full acts and you tour with your band and stuff. But you also, I mean, it seems like one of your main things is you'll perform a couple of songs. And so it allows you to essentially build an album piece by piece.
Yeah.
As opposed to, like, I have to lock myself away for 6 months, write the entire thing, record the entire thing, then have an entire thing.
I fantasize about that, but I also think that I wouldn't realistically get it done the same way. I mean, it is hard because I think a lot of artists, especially ones that have the benefit of like a major label and, like real resources behind them, get to be either in a creation mode or an execution mode and like have their time of creativity and then they tour. I don't have that luxury. So I'm constantly, I'm also a one person business and like full operation. So I'm booking tours while I'm on tour, while I'm writing, while I'm lining up the next project. And so there just isn't that time for just to like retreat in the woods and write a whole album, even though that sounds so nice.
It's such a fantasy. And like, I know that people at like a level of success probably do enjoy that. I mean, sure, the pressure is much higher in a lot of different ways too. But yeah, I feel like, that's kind of the practice of art is like, oh, no. Like, oh, you're on a plane? Write a thing on a plane. Oh, your plane's delayed? Write a thing in the airport. Oh, like, you just figure out a way to make it work. And again, like the muse, it's just, sometimes she won't find you. And that's just fine. You still have to frickin' put the words to the page.
Totally.
That's a superpower.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. So tell me about the experience. So you have recorded a couple of albums, right?
Yes. Yeah. So I have 2 live albums, which was sort of my first live album. I had this idea of like, oh, I know how to afford making an album. I'll just do it live. So it's only one take for every song. And then people will buy tickets and that's how I'll pay for the recording. And then it'll just pay for itself. And then I have an album. And then of course the night of, I'm like, where the hell did I do this? Only one take per song. This is insane. But it's kind of cool because it's kind of like a little bit of a stand-up comedy album kind of vibe to it because you can hear the audience laughter. I'm talking between a lot of the songs. I start and stop a couple times and we all laugh about it together. So, it kind of like puts you in the room. And so my second album, I did the same way. I also have a Christmas album that I just, again, like I did that in the studio, but it was just me and my ukulele in like 2 hours of studio time. So I did that really cheaply as well. But then my latest album, I finally did like a full band studio album. And that was like the first time I really got to just like make this, work the way I wanted. And that was such a cool experience. I was in the studio for 2 weeks, which is a very luxurious amount of time for an artist of my stature. And I brought in a full band and we recorded an analog. And it's on vinyl now, and it just like sounds really pretty. Vinyl.
How's it feel to hear yourself on vinyl?
It feels awesome, especially because it was an analog studio, which means that there were like no computers used in the making of this album. It felt like wizardry.
The way that people used to record.
Right, exactly. It was just super cool. And, and even though it's a studio album, recording analog means that you aren't doing a million takes. So it does still preserve some of that kind of immediacy and like chemistry that was in the room and like a, feeling of like an actual performance rather than things that had been cut and pasted and sort of assembled and overproduced. So, so that's my latest album. That's They've Done Studies, which I produced along with a live show, which you were at, called Studies Have Shown. And then we took that, the full band and a multimedia projection show on the road around the country for 5 weeks last summer. So yeah, that's sort of the latest thing.
Was that your first tour with a band?
Yeah, well, my first tour with my band. Okay. I was in a band years ago called Antioquia, and that was like my first like working musician taste. And we toured the country like nonstop for about 2 years.
Oh, wow.
So I kind of knew what I was getting into. But this was like the first time I took my band, my show. I booked the whole thing, tour managed the whole thing, drove.
Wow.
Yeah. So
how did you assemble your band?
It was auditions, basically. It was, I first put the word out to friends and ultimately landed with friends of friends. And yeah, that process happened like pretty quickly once I knew kind of like what kind of sound I was going for. Yeah, that was fun, getting to like audition people and really sort of get very precise about putting it together.
Was it all about the music for who you wanted, or was it also about the message? Or like, hey, are you on board with
It's funny, yeah. I was very focused on the music and musicianship. And then it's sort of like after that, I was, especially with my drummer, Tim, who I'm now very close with, but I didn't know him before the band. And I had a phone call with him. And I was like, what, just so you know, like, because one of the songs that we auditioned with was kind of like raunchy-ish, but like it gets real raunchy. So I had this phone call with him and I was like, so just so you know, like there's a lot of my material that's like really adult themed and like pretty like explicit. And, like I have a like song about golden showers and a song about rimming. And he was just like, cool. And I've now learned that like he's just like super on board with the whole mission. But he also, when you first get to know him, is like a man of not many words. So I was like, all right, I think this guy's down. Like, let's just do it. Let's try it out. And it just ended up working out. Yeah.
And so it's an all-male band, right?
It is. I know. I realized this the other day that I end up working with men for the most part. I do think part of that is because the music industry is just probably a good 80% men, like maybe 75%. And the women that are working musicians are front women and songwriters. So I think that's a big reason why. But I have also sort of started to like question that and be like, I gotta get more women on my team. But yeah, it's a funny fact about, it's a bunch of white dudes in my band. It's kind of
fun though. I mean, like you being the leader of this band and basically singing all these songs about feminism and raunchy things while these guys are like, supporting you with my rhythm section.
Totally. I gave them like feminist t-shirts to wear.
Oh, that's right. I remember
it's like
that.
Ovaries before broveries, which is my favorite.
That's a really good one.
Doesn't really make sense. I love it.
So, I mean, is there anything that you don't write about or haven't written about or afraid to write about?
Interesting. You mean in the realm of like sex or just in anything?
Yeah. I mean, is there anything that you feel like would push your edges?
Yeah. I don't really want to weigh in on trigger warnings. I think I'm going to, don't need to write about trigger warnings. There's certain struggles that I feel like are like important that they're happening, but I don't necessarily have like the like party line vernacular and don't feel like it's my thing that I want to talk about. So I just sort of like step away from those issues. If I feel like something is really going wrong in the movement that's like seriously detrimental, I'll speak to it. But there's just a lot of things where I'm like, that's not my issue. Don't need to like hold the banner for that.
That sounds like the Free the Nipple song.
Yeah, that's a great example. So I wrote a song called Free the Nipple because it was commissioned. There was a Kickstarter reward for my first Kickstarter, and the reward was I'll write a song about anything. that you want me to. And this guy wanted me to write a song about the Free the Nipple movement. And it's a perfect example of a movement that I just doesn't like speak to me as like a super important pressing need for, you know, women to fight for the legal right to show their nipples in public. And for those that don't know, you know, because actually this is a little old at this point. The world moves so quickly now.
Yeah, right.
But the Free the Nipple movement was sort of, you know, it happened in New York, I think. So mainly it was like a group of like young, mostly white, mostly pretty conventionally attractive women, sort of doing a bunch of activism around, you know, running around shirtless and stuff like that. And, you know, this was a very appealing movement to the mainstream for obvious reasons. And a lot of celebrities got on board and it got a lot of traction and the hashtag went viral in a big way. And I just like didn't care. But I had to write a song about it. So I wrote a song about that very struggle, which is actually a great thing to do when you feel conflicted about an issue. But yeah, there's like a few of those. You know, I feel like there isn't a lot of room lately, especially in the sort of like sex positive, feminist, queer world for disagreement among people who are basically on the same side. And I think that's a problem. I think it's like a big problem. But I also am aware of the reality and aware of like how much mental energy I have and like choose to like pick certain battles over others and don't particularly feel like being like piled on if I say the wrong thing.
Do you feel like you experienced that already? I mean, as a songwriter, do you feel like...
No, I feel like I've been very blessed to... God, I never use that word. That's so funny. Hashtag blessed. To have weirdly like not, I think I'm just not famous enough to have like pissed off that many people. You know, I've gotten a few emails from people that feel that I got things wrong. And, you know, my response, what I always want to write back to those people is like, I hope that you wrote an email to your congressperson as well about something that actually like affects your life and also like you elected them. Yeah. I am like an artist and I don't actually like speak for a community at all. That's one of the great things about being an artist or a writer as opposed to like a movement leader or an organizer or a politician. It's like I can just sort of be a product of the moment. I don't have to like, you know, Ripley, this is, I don't know if you listeners at home can hear my puppy. She's normally very well behaved.
She wants you to start a movement. That's what she
said. Exactly. She's like, dude, just realize that you're a leader here. So I'm always like, okay, so we're policing like artists, you know, whatever, policing is a charged term, but, you know, we're telling artists and writers that they got things wrong and like how much energy are we actually putting into the people in power? Right. That's what I want to respond. Usually I don't respond, but
well, it's nice that, I mean, even the idea of asking, like, are you writing emails to people who actually can change things? I mean, that's an upgrade for me, right? Like, I am always answering emails from people. Most of them are, again, like, fan letters are really wonderful things, but even when I get like a kind of mixed one, it's just, you know, how it digs. And you're like, oh, you didn't love everything.
Right.
But that's a really great response of like, especially around sexuality, it's like, and gender and misogyny and all these things. It's like, actually, like, the personal is the political, interestingly enough, always. Yeah. And so when we're talking about sexuality and women's bodies and all those things, like, there's a lot to dig into. And so I like the idea of you talking about, you know, even just sitting with the complexity of things. I feel like that's part of what I want to do with this podcast, but also part of what I want to do in my life is, like, acknowledge how complex these things are and not turn away from the complexity of them and not turn them into slogans.
Right.
Because I think a friend of mine the other day said, like, the revolution will not be sloganized.
Or hashtagged.
That's really helpful to remember because, like, hashtag me too, hashtag free the nipple, hashtag all the things. It's like, yeah, sure, but that's like, that can raise awareness, but we need to have a conversation and we need to look each other in the eye, hopefully, and have the conversations we need to have.
And realize that we get better when we have to argue our points. So if someone doesn't if someone doesn't agree with us, it's actually an opportunity for us to really probe ourselves for why we believe this thing and like learn from that argument.
Yeah.
You know, rather than just get so offended that they even brought up this thing that that bothers you.
Yeah.
And you know, and realize that among friends, among like, you know, people that are in the same fight together, there can be legitimate disagreement.
Yeah. I had the reason why Girl Sex 101 is trans inclusive is because of an amazing woman who wrote to me and said, you have an opportunity here.
Yeah.
Like, you need to make this book trans inclusive of trans women. And if you don't, this book will not be what it should be. And it was a very firmly worded email, and it scared the crap out of me because I was still in the nascent phase. Like, I was still assembling who I wanted to invite to write for it.
Right.
And I knew that I wanted to invite some trans women, but I didn't know like in what capacity would I ask them to speak. And this woman, it was a very firm email, and I was terrified and I was uncomfortable. And then like I sat with it for a while, and I'm like, she's absolutely right. Like, she's absolutely right. Like, I have choices, and the choices I can make, they're my choices to make. Yeah. But like, what do I actually want to do in order to further this conversation?
Right.
And because of that, because of a very brave person who reached out to me, I was able to like change the dialogue for myself. And then, like you said, like interrogate my own assumptions about what was important.
Right.
And that was hugely beneficial.
Totally.
And that's what I love about being an artist in this era where we have email and Twitter. Yeah. It can hurt sometimes when people like tag you in a thing that they hate.
But they sent you an email, right? Yeah. So I do think that is a better way of handling that situation than, you know, I mean, they could have just gone on Twitter and just been like, I heard a rumor that Allison, you know, and just tried to destroy you because you were doing something that they had a problem with.
Right.
And based on, they perceived that you were going to.
Yeah, and that's exactly the thing. It's
and
like,
so an email, I think, is it's fine. You know, send people emails if you disagree with them. That's great. But is it, I think the thing that people should ask themselves is like, are you blackmailing them, or are you starting a conversation? And are you open to receiving the other side? Right. And, you know, like, talking about it. Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah, I mean, the idea that like some cultural artifacts just won't be as good or won't be as relevant. And it's like, does that suddenly become that you're a trash person making trash work? Or is it like, actually, this is not just as resonant as it could be. Right. That's actually the angle we should approach this stuff from. Yes. Like, oh, this movie actually got this thing wrong, and time will forget it because it didn't do it right.
Exactly.
As opposed to like, now suddenly we're putting all this pressure on everybody to be perfect at every time.
Right. So, yeah, totally.
So what's next for you?
So, that's a very good question. Last year was I've been on a kind of cycle of each year releasing an album, and last year was so much output that I'm not releasing an album this year. And I'm just kind of touring and thinking about that very question. So I will keep you posted.
Oh, nice. I'm looking forward to hearing.
Yeah.
So where can people find you in the world if they want to find you?
So RachelLark.com is basically the entryway to everything. You can follow me at Rachel Lark Music on Twitter and Instagram. And I tour the West Coast pretty frequently, hopefully get into the East Coast this year.
Cool. Awesome. Well, Rachel Lark, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks.
And as well as Ripley, thank you for being here, Ripley. Awesome. That's it for episode 1 of Artgasm. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. And please spread the word. Obviously, I'm just getting started. We have so many episodes that are already amazing and done and ready for your ear holes. And I am going to want to give you more episodes. I'm really enjoying the creation of this podcast. I hope you enjoyed listening to it. So please subscribe. It's the best way for other listeners to learn about Artgasm. Also, if you're really into what I'm doing, please consider becoming a patron. You can find the Artgasm Patreon at patreon.com/artgasm. That's patreon.com/artgasm, ARTGASM. Patrons get special monthly solo episodes from me where I dive into an artwork or a news story that's particularly relevant to art and sex. And you can also, as a patron, share your comments and questions to be read on the air and suggest artworks and topics for us to cover in future episodes. So I think it's pretty special to become a Patreon, and it will really help because I'd like to add transcripts to this podcast and eventually upgrade my recording equipment to make the recording on the road and behind the scenes a little bit easier. You'll notice in some future episodes that the sound quality is a little bit all over the place. For the most part, it's very listenable, but there are moments when I really, really wish I had a digital portable recorder, and I don't have one of those. So if you support me on Patreon, that will help improve the sound quality for future episodes so much. So Patreon is how you can make that happen. Please check it out. Also, if you want to follow up with any of the artists that I cover, please check out artgasmcast.com, where you'll see all the show notes and you'll see all the links to all the things we talk about, any sort of elucidations and various things, like, for instance, the quote that Rachel Lark said about deadlines. That was Douglas Adams. I only found that out after I Googled it after the show was over. So if you were wondering about that, that's how you can find out. If you have any questions about anything that feels like an open thread, you can always tweet me at Hey Allie Moon. That's Hey ALLIE Moon. Or you can reach out by email at artgasmcast@gmail.com. Or check out the show notes because maybe your question already got answered in there. And finally, episode 2 is coming up shortly. It features Bastard Keith, an MC and actor based in New York City. I had such a good time talking with Bastard Keith. He's so funny. He's so charming. It was such a good time. So stick around for episode 2. Again, you can get delivered straight into your inbox if you subscribe. So thanks so much. I'll see you next time.